Welcome, everyone, to this episode of Freedom Hub's Working Group. I'm your host, Jeff Cantor, along with Charles Froman, and we are sponsored by the Freedom Hub. We are here to disrupt as much as we can, and you'll find us at yourmp.com. We want to take you over there for a quick second here as we jump into today. When you get to the home page, you'll find there's an awful lot of tabs and information to go through, and you'll want to take some time to do so. We do have under the home the webinar and then the continuing the conversation. Let's jump to that because that's actually kind of like the next step. So after you've heard the speaker of the day and you want to connect with that person, this is your way to do so and get into their world, their blogging, whatever they're engaged in. This is your place to go to find out about them and to stay on top of it. But when you kick over webinars, you'll come to the main page. Here you'll have a little rundown on what we're doing, the breakout on the two different shows that we're doing, and then future guests. And then down here, very importantly, is the link to where the videos are archived after the fact. So here we'll click on this Brighteon one as an example, and you'll see we've not missed a Wednesday for years on end. And there's some incredible people you're going to want to connect with for sure. So that's really very important, and we definitely want to highlight that. But what we want to do is get right into it today. So let's find out what's going on today, and let's let Charles take it from here.
So here we are again with the wireless radiation harm issue. We've had Theodore Scarazzo from Environmental Health Trust a couple of times on the overall threat that is played down by the media, and not very many folks are really aware of this issue. And more recently, we had Jenny DeMarco and Mary Bauer talk about the bill from my client, National Health Federation, to stop the fact that telecom can carpet the world with antennas outside your bedroom and on top of your kid's school without any monitoring at all. And if we did monitor at least the maximum allowed emissions, both radiation and power, Mary Bauer, our radio frequency engineer friend, would say that for 5G to work, all the dense way they have to array all the antennas, they easily would exceed those maximum permissible emission limits, and that would trigger mitigation, which it basically means set these antennas a certain distance away from our kids in the classrooms, away from our bedrooms and elsewhere. Realtors are up in arms about the property, the value hits when you have these big antennas near the property. It's an issue that's not going to go away anytime soon. And one of the leading attorneys in this world is Julian Gresser at Swankin and Turner. And I've known Jim Turner at that law firm for years, and Julian is someone that my friends Jenny and Mary met recently, and they are now focused on a really interesting issue to focus America's attention on the kids. When you tell people that their kids are at risk of harm from these wireless antennas mounted on top of their classrooms, that is when the parents start to listen. And they have a project, Tech Safe Schools, to solicit schools in each state to try something that's actually faster for downloads and safer and more secure. And that's good old wired broadband. Those fiber optics, copper wiring. It's better in so many ways. Julian is the founder of an international broadband legal action network. All these lawyers talk to one another on what to do and how to do it. He is the CEO of Big Heart Technologies because it isn't just about safe wireless for schools today. It's about also Julian's wider experience in conscious ways of advocacy. He's really an expert in some of these high-level psychological communication techniques and studies around synchronicity, serendipity. And from his vast experience in public interest activism, he thinks activists, regardless of the issue, are missing out on some of his negotiation expertise that he's learned working with top negotiators and business folks in the Far East, Japan. And so he really wants to coach us on how to up our game on getting, safer schools, but also help us with other solutions we need for a better world. Well, that's the intro, Jeff.
Fantastic. All vital information for sure. So Julian, the screen is yours.
Well, thank you very much, Jeff and Charles, and delighted to be here with your audience and participants, and Jenny and Mary and other colleagues. I'll begin this way. What society would knowingly expose children in its care to continuing and multiplying dangers without taking protective and remedial action? The telecom, cell phone, and smart meter companies and the federal government, in particular the FCC and the FDA, have full knowledge of these dangers, but they are deliberately enabling, this is in the federal government, and even encouraging misleading and false claims regarding radio frequency, radiation safety, and wireless security to support the purveyors of these products in maximizing corporate profits. How far have we descended? How much farther will we fall? Now, I understand that many in this audience are greatly mistrustful of government and intrusive regulation on our personal freedoms. I believe your mistrust and concerns are well earned. However, in the context of RFR, invasion of privacy and manipulation of children, parents, and teachers, the remedy, in my opinion, is not even greater license to heartless companies and enabling political appointees in these lead agencies, FCC and FDA. Rather, it is a new model of effective and conscious action within the framework of law and legal process. Today, I will offer a practical path to restore balance in a wildly unbalanced situation. I will discuss briefly what I call three powers that I believe can help concerned parents, teachers, teachers' unions, states, and local communities turn the tide. The term power may seem, for some, a bit odd in this context. However, as I will show, it is directly on point. We are dealing with massive disempowerment of individuals, children, parents, indeed throughout our society at large. I will focus on capacities and skills many of us inherently possess to some degree and can cultivate further and become particularly powerful when combined, reinforced, and focused through strategic alliances with the professional knowledge and skills of lawyers backed up by the law. So the first power that I'd like to discuss of three is really the law. The power of civil and criminal process, the power of the state, courts, legislature, and the prosecutory offices, the district attorneys. I don't know whether you thought of law as a power, but it's a formidable power that is usually in the hands of the wealthy and powerful corporations against the public. However, the public artfully can understand the power of law, particularly when focused on what I call the legal acupuncture points. So in regard to the first power, I would like to say, I believe the dike of the colossus, this wireless colossus, is becoming infirm and may very soon break. And I'd like to give you a few legal tools that perhaps haven't been put together quite this way that will empower you in working with your counsel wherever he or she is. The first and most important point in regard to schools is that school administrators, principals, have a fiduciary duty, a legal high duty of responsibility of trust for children in their care. This is well documented. Now, if we couple this duty of care with the facts on the ground that they are being informed of the harms of wireless And these harms are not only physical harms to children who are particularly in danger, whose brains are developing, where we have ample evidence of anxiety, of sleeplessness, children who do not have the power to express themselves except with their tears, high-end anxiety, also delusional effects. This knowledge, this data is well available and made available to these administrators through our Tech Safe Schools programs. Therefore, the harms are in a legal sense foreseeable, and the most important basic duty of care is to be informed and to inform. This data that I referred to is well available both in the Tech Safe Schools site as well as on the Environmental Health Trust site. And we did a special program on the science and health part of this, led by Nobel laureate Deborah Davis. Now, the principal weapon being used by school administrators and the companies is the federal government has already occupied this field. It is so-called preempted by the Telecommunications Act. This weapon is used in an example in Tahoe, where we have litigation where our client has 2 disabled children, and the school principal citing this so-called preemption doctrine based on the premise that the FCC has already said this is safe, exposure of children is safe. They wouldn't even meet with our client, not even to meet to discuss it. In New Orleans, a cardiologist has her child, they have a macro tower right in the playground, and she's trying to point out to the administrator that kids who are exposed continuously to this children may have a cardiac episode, and nobody's paying any attention to her. There's a parochial school in San Diego. They have a macro tower right on the playground, and none of the parents are willing to stand up to the principal, and it goes on and on and on. What I try to show you is this premise that everything is safe and preempted is legally very weak. Their hands are not tied whatsoever. The most important first point, which Charles mentioned, is it's quite likely that if we measure the degree of radiation, there is an FCC rule itself that talks about aggregate exposure. And so it's unclear as to whether if you have a situation with not just a tower, but you also have smart meters, maybe a panel of smart meters, computers, routers, and so forth. They're all working together to irradiate these children. One could interpret the FCC rule to say we look at the aggregate exposure, and if any contributor is more than 5%, they're all out of compliance. This is a very powerful rule. My colleague, Joe Sandry, who's president of the National Spectrum Managers Association, points out that in these interference cases, and we're really looking at interference with biological systems, you win invariably if you can measure the degree of exposure. In other words, the dose effect. We have the tools right today to go into schools and measure the aggregate exposure and show that they're out of compliance with the FCC's own rule. I'm not saying it's every case, but it's an absolute slam dunk winner and has nothing to do with preemption. So you can begin to see the picture that I'm trying to paint of the power that we have, the public has, the parents have. If the administrators say, sorry, we're just complying with the law says that the defense of what's called regulatory compliance cannot be used if it's done intentionally and willfully. Very, very shaky, that defense in that regard. There's no insurance available to schools or to the telecom companies or cell phone companies for EMF radiation, RFR exposure. They may say they have it, but they don't. It's not available. Lloyd's won't insure it. Swiss Re will not insure it. So it's a false claim being made to the schools. They are at risk. So if you were a school administrator, begin to get the sense of the picture that we're trying to paint here, when you already have knowledge that you're actually enabling the harm. The indemnity clauses that they sign with these companies, they say they promise to indemnify, backed by insurance. These indemnity clauses may be illusory. There's a question of immunity. If the public officials are actually public officials as opposed to private school administrators, there's a serious question of what's called misfeasance in office. It's extremely doubtful whether the immediate immunity protection will extend to a situation where there's a willful assault, which is really what this is, on children and their well-being. There's serious legal ethics questions in terms of lawyers that are representing companies with full knowledge that these companies are harming children. And I refer you to our recent program with a group of lawyers who looked at the ethical issues of this on our website at bbelon.com. So what are the tides of change? And that is really what I'd like us to focus on for a minute. First of all, we have the marvelous decision. It's got some strong weaknesses, but it's basically a great decision on August 13th involving Environmental Health Trust, Children's Health Defense versus FCC. And it applies, I believe, to local governments, at least in its spirit, to say you can't just sort of make a conclusionary position. You have to sort of support it with some sort of empirical record that you've seriously studied the question. So the premise that, oh, our hands are tied to just permit this kind of hazardous activity is legally questionable under that case. Our legal group, the Balance Group, is about to file in the next few weeks what is called a petition under the imminent hazard rules to the Health and Human Services Administration, Department of Health and Human Services, and the FDA, to say the fundamental kingpin of the whole legal battle is the proposition presented by the FCC that its present thermal standard is safe. Now, the FCC has already admitted in court, in the court decision I referenced, that they have no expertise at all on health. Therefore, they rely on the FDA. But the FDA has no official policy on EMF harms. Now, they have a picture on their website of somebody with a cell phone right next to their ear, almost encouraging that kind of conduct. And they have spent $25 million on a study involving cancer with rats, which confirmed the proposition that exposure of these poor rats to RFR was seriously dangerous and it caused a significant possibility of causing cancer in rats. And then one official turned around and arbitrarily said it didn't apply because it involved rats. So there's no official policy. And what we're saying in that case is to say there is, or to pretend there is, or encourage that there is actually a false and misleading claim and creating nationally an imminent hazard for all those people, the companies, the local communities, the school boards that are relying on the fundamental proposition that it's safe.
As usual, another great guest, but a quick diversion. You'll notice that our full name is the Marketplace for Health, Wealth, and Freedom. Well, let's talk about your health for a moment. If you'd like to escape from the stranglehold of insurance and be able to see alternative doctors or go across state lines for care, then you definitely need to take a look at patientempowerment.mpb.health and see if that's the fix you've been looking for. Now, let's get back to the show.
It's good to see that in the Congress, Senators Markey and Blumenthal already have legislation. I just turned it on the other day involving protecting kids. And then yesterday, when I was thinking of Jenny and Mary and Virginia and their struggle with to protect children and deliver safe learning environments, I turn on the television and there I see Frances Hogan's testimony, a whistleblower, in terms of how Facebook is intentionally taking this data and using it to alter behavior to addict children. And I thought the really essential and important point that I hope that Jenny and Mary will develop is that we're talking about the same device that causes these RFR radiation harms is the very same device that is gathering the data that they use to manipulate the children and the parents, alter their behavior, addict them, and then finally, the very process of being exposed is addictive. And so there's a very vicious circle at play here. And then lastly, with great applause, I recognize Governor Newsom's veto on these pernicious bills promoted by the telecom companies. That was his finest hour. So we have ample legal power. That is my first point, as illustrated and explained today. The second power I'd like to talk about briefly is resilient negotiation, setting up to succeed. You can't get what you want simply by wanting it or protesting or demanding it. We get what we negotiate. What we all want in this forum, you and I, is safe learning environments for our kids. How do we deliver this result? How do we set up to succeed? All encounters, direct and indirect, are negotiations, meaning moving your cause forward, negotiate the river, negotiate the mountains, not just haggle to get to an agreement, because the players we're dealing with will violate the agreement almost when the ink isn't yet dry. Every negotiation, winning negotiation, begins with understanding the other, having a mission. Mission is always in the world of the other player that can make the decision, producing a plan built on a system. The art in business of negotiation is based on Kaizen, continuous enhanced performance. We develop a system, we support it by training and effective coaching, and we learn how we win so we can do it again. If we make mistakes, we understand we harvest our losses, but we can recover a mistake, an error, on an instant. And that enables us to win more powerfully and easily. We do this step by step, move by move, situation by situation. Now, in the game we're playing, in the arena we're playing, there's a special challenge. How well are those who are listening understand, and how able are you to unmask the shadow players in the shadow game? The shadow game I came upon in some of the most ferocious negotiations in Asia that I was involved in, assisting my foreign clients. I had a law firm in Tokyo. It has the shadow players have the singular goal to create havoc in your decision-making process by breaking your integrity, making you be emotional, in desperate need, wasting your time, your effort, your money, your precious available funds, and most importantly, your creativity. So they just basically move you all over the chess board. The shadow, it's called shadow because you rarely even understand that you're being played. Is this not exactly what these congressional hearings are about? It's all invisible. The radiation is invisible. The use of your data is invisible. The manipulation of your children is invisible. It's the shadow game. So how do we play the shadow game? How do we neutralize it? Sun Tzu, the great Chinese martial artist, said, in the art of war, you know yourself, you know the opponent, you cannot be defeated in 100 battles. You know yourself, you fail to know the other, you win half, you lose half. If you don't know yourself and you don't know the other, you'll lose all the time. The forces that we're dealing with are not monolithic. We can learn to divide and conquer. Right now, in our satellite work, we are aligned with a major satellite company that, lo and behold, is citing our work and pointing out that this massive commercialization, exploitation of space requires a comprehensive environmental assessment of its risks. This company has its own motives, albeit, but is siding with us to challenge the chief protagonist, SpaceX, in its aggressive move and permits that they are receiving from the FCC. So there are many people of goodwill in government, particularly at the professional level, who are outraged and appalled by what the political level is doing to children, to the country, at the FCC and the FDA. If you come in with metrics, we will have many allies within the government, even within the industry with these companies. That the marketing people could have run away with the show, but the professional people who are in charge with human at the CEO level, the board level, do not want to have huge liabilities with no insurance to support them. So there are many ways in which we can win these negotiations. And the key point is base hits. We do it step by step. That meeting with that key decision maker, that meeting with a philanthropist, a key ally. We build it together and we work together. That's the second power, artful, resilient negotiation. The third, and I'll be somewhat brief, is what I call the power of synchronicity, powered by synchronicity. Many people listening have had amazing coincidence, often pivotal and meaningful in your life. In most cases, we notice and dismiss them as mere chance. But what if it's possible to cultivate a serendipity mindset to help us navigate through the chaos of present-day US and the world? What role might this third power play in winning our negotiations with school superintendents, school boards, state and local officials? I should say that in my brief comments here, I refer to coincidence, synchronicity, and serendipity, which are these chance events, which actually, if you look into it, are increasingly normal, that have often for us deep meaning if we know how to read the code, the hidden code, and act upon it. I refer to coincidence, synchronicity, and serendipity collectively as CSS. So here's an example right here. So I was thinking of my friends Jenny and Mary. I think it was yesterday. And I was thinking about, we've been talking about doing some work together. And I turn on the channel, and at that very moment I'm thinking about them is Frances Hogan before Brian Schatz, who some of our legal friends are very close to, interviewing her, explaining exactly what we're talking about, but before the whole Congress. Now, I didn't engineer that. It just happened like that. Now, we don't just pass by it. We recognize that in some way, our inner self and our outer self, these hearings, are aligned at that moment. What does that mean? How can we act upon the signal? I've had a long-standing interest in this subject, I would say about 30 years. In fact, when I wrote my book years ago, Piloting Through Chaos, I came upon a discovery, and I call it the graphs. And I got interested because the whole book was based on integrity, that capacity to stay connected and whole and adaptive. How in Asia, they write it with the eye of discovery, in dynamic balance with the hand of action and the heart of compassion. When you get into a state of integrity, extraordinary things happen. So I began to watch what happened when I fell out of integrity from a number, I became needy, for example. And then I would get out of need. I would build what I came to now see as resilience, and extraordinary things would happen on the external line. Well, I'm less windy now. I don't need 15 different parameters. There's a bit of overkill. All you really need to do is understand what's happening with your internal resilience and watch what happens on the external part of your life. And you will begin to see an amazing nexus, as though it's not as though you caused these good things to happen. It has to do with tapping into a resonance field, of which you have inner power. Now, of all the forms of this aspects of it, I have most recently come to value and appreciate the role of love. I'm not talking about it in a moralistic way or a abstract spiritual way. I trained for years with a Chinese grandmaster, Li Junfeng, who developed a Qigong, the martial art of working with the Qi of the heart. And so we're talking about cultivating a heart energy field, which you can view as a place of refuge, where love deepens CSS and you can connect your love energy field to anything that shows up in a moment. So really what we're discussing here in the third power is what in Chinese martial arts, like Tai Chi, Qigong, refer to as an inner martial art. And they recognize this very clearly. And we have some wonderful books. I refer you to Christian Bush's Serendipity Mindset, to my colleague, Dr. Bernie Bateman's Connecting with Coincidence, and the marvelous work of a Dutch Serendipity Society of academics all over the world who are looking at this new field with real care and precision. So in short, we're talking about the capacity to become what psychologists call field independent. The more we flow, the more events, people, opportunities are attracted to us. It's an art form, and you can verify and validate it for yourself. So we can learn together how to seed CSS, how to listen, how to understand the meeting, how to connect with others, how to expand this power together, how to flow, and how to act effectively with our mission, how to deliver safe learning environments for children.
So what about your wealth? If your money could actually talk to you, would you listen to it? Well, with the DNA Network Academy, your money actually can talk to you, and it's going to tell you just what it told this client. This family had over 24 debts, mortgages, car loans, the works. They were on track to take 20 years to pay it all off and instead did it in 8.5. Plus, they did it without refinancing, making more money, or even changing their lifestyle. So find out for yourself with a free analysis that is completely confidential. No personal information, no social security numbers, no credit checks, none of that nonsense. But what is exciting is that the outcome of that report you receive is a guaranteed outcome for you. To get that report, head on over to bit.ly/debt to wealth. You will arrive at this simple form. Fill it in as simple as lender number 1 and credit card number 2. What really matters is the accuracy of your numbers. You'll be able to see that if instead of 20 years or whatever your number is, that you may actually be out of debt and on your way to wealth in as little as 6.3 years like this client.
2 minutes of conclusion and I'm done. We're fast approaching, I believe, a tipping inflection point. On one hand, we're spiraling downward, but also we're spiraling upward. And we are increasingly aware and becoming increasingly concerned that these two spirals are occurring simultaneously. What I've tried to offer today is a conceptual framework supported by 3 powers to accelerate this positive transition upward. The focus is specific. Our goal is to ensure across this country, and hopefully maybe in other countries, safe learning environments for our children. It's extraordinary that we have a practical, cost-effective, available solution. There are few wicked problems in this world where you actually have something available. And that, as Charles has pointed out, is optical fiber wired to the schools, the 21st century wired classroom. Again, if you go to the Tech Safe Schools website, you will see a whole program on the technology of practically how to do it. The skills and model that I've been describing are focused on children, but they have many broad applications for other serious challenges arising from political and corporate greed and tyranny in the world today. So to paraphrase Shakespeare, with a little of my own ideas tossed in, all is readiness if our minds and hearts be so. So thank you very much. I really look forward to our conversation together. I will mention that I hope that we can explore a little bit if there are questions. I have in mind after Thanksgiving to launch a nationwide program on these 3 powers, inviting all those in communities and teachers association and others who are deeply concerned about protecting our children to train together. And we'll develop a template of legislation that could support Senators Markey and Blumenthal at the federal level in the Congress, that could be used by states and local communities, turnkey. And so if you're interested and we can discuss this together, do send either Charles and Jeff or Ben and me at the BB Elon website, and we can keep in touch as we can develop this program in a way that optimally addresses your interests, your concerns, your fears, your hopes. Okay, I look forward to our discussion.
Okay, very good. That was really fantastic. And one of the things you're emphasizing is the importance of that continuing the conversation feature of what we do, because this talk, like all of them, is just the beginning. So once you return to the website, you'll click in that area and you'll be able to keep up to date with Julian all the time. Meanwhile, I was going to ask you though, with the, it's really good that you try to figure out what's the obvious, and sadly we always have to wait till it really becomes like, you know, what hits the fan, and then we start to react to it. But we're at that point for sure, and that definitely emphasizes the idea of what we're doing here with the idea of the synergies that are created by the Freedom Working Group. So I really appreciate that. But why don't you tell us, is there any training or anything you've got on that program you're describing? Is there something already in place for people to start to engage in?
Yes, this is based on, I suppose, 25 years of experience. There's a book that I've written, which it occurred to me that it's an online book. It's available. We will just post it for you and on our BB Elon website. We've also created an online training program, which is at the resilienceMultiplier.com website. And that's called Resilient Negotiation. And it's part of a package which includes an app we created called 5 Minutes to Resilience. Most people think that resilience just happens. It really doesn't. It's a learnable skill. And in an instant, you can begin to develop this power. And finally, what I am also considering, perhaps in collaboration with you and Charles, and your emphasis on synergy, because that's really what we're talking about, a program which we've done successfully, I have for many, many years, using Zoom now, to train professional negotiators in these skills.
Excellent. Jenny, I see your hand up.
Julian, that was wonderful, as always. I learned something every time I listen to you, so thank you for that. I just wanted to add on to what you had said in your first point around the schools and what's happening with our children, and the interesting concept of RFR being extremely harmful because of the reliance on the false claims by the FDA and the FCC. But to piggyback on that, there's a huge crossover between the symptoms, and actually I'm going to attribute this to our RFR expert, Mary Bauer, who's also on this call, and she's going to follow up with what I say in a little bit more detail. But I want to piggyback on that because there is crossover in the symptoms of screen addiction. So right now in Virginia, for example, we've got this digital safety guidelines, which it seems like really great on the face of it. It seems great that they're paying attention to these safety guidelines and they're putting them out to schools, but they completely gloss over the radiation part of it, and they're calling it digital device guidelines and only talking about the screen portion of things, which is if you just think, oh, okay, well, we'll wear blue light glasses or we'll sit appropriately and my kid will be fine. It doesn't get into all the other symptoms that in fact cross over with RFR and screen addiction. So your child is becoming addicted to these devices and now being pushed onto them, using them for the curriculum. All the curriculum is now being built around these devices, and they're spending in a lot of time on them. And then on top of that, they're getting overexposed to the RFR, which is extremely harmful. So I know Mary had a few things to add on that, but I just wanted to expand on what Julian said.
So Mary, just 1 minute, I just want to make one statement, and then I'm very eager to hear what you say, building on what Jenny said. I mentioned the shadow game. One of the devices of the shadow players is uncertainty, to pretend that or use scientific uncertainty as a cudgel against the weak. The other is piecemealing, and what you've identified is a strategy, and that is to piecemeal, which feeds our vertically siloed way of thinking today, that it's only the screen that's the problem. How does the shadow game play? We attack the mind with false assumptions. If I can have you believe that the only problem is the screen, I own you because you pay no attention to what's really important. I'm trying to give you a sense this is a very well orchestrated game, and every move they make, we can decipher and neutralize. Mary, please.
So I went on a journey down a rabbit hole with this screen time addiction. There's a group in Virginia that helped with the legislation of HB 817, the legislation Jenny was talking about with the digital device guidelines. And that group is called the Screen Time Action Network, which has now become Fair Play. But they did a lot of investigation into the screen time addiction. Now, I had understood the screen time addiction to be done by the flicker rate of the screen light. And gamers actually use a slower flicker rate because they were the ones mostly impacted by this particular aspect of screen addictions. So you have to know when you go and buy a computer, like you have to really look at the specifications on that if you want to avoid a harmful screen flicker rate, with the light. But the other thing I realized when I reviewed some of the town hall comments that they posted on that website, townhall.virginia.gov, a particular Screen Time Action Network person who was a nurse listed a host of symptoms from screen time addiction, and there was a 90% overlap in RFR bioeffects. So that led me to believe, oh, okay, well, this must be flicker rate plus radiation. So I actually went, I own HP laptops. I actually went to HP and asked them, are there more than just the WLAN? Are there more than just the WLAN antennas that connect to the card, in this laptop? And sure enough, in the top right-hand corner, there are circular antennas. So the whole display acts as a receiver. And there's a wire that goes down the side of the screen that attaches to these WLAN cards that are in the metal chassis of the computer. But I guess my point is that the Chromebooks probably operate the same way, and so does every other laptop, that you have to be very careful about putting it in airplane mode to disable these Wi-Fi antennas. Now with Chromebooks, they don't have an airplane mode. That's another thing I just found out. Excuse me, sorry about that. So I just found this out. So the child has to establish these set of protocols before they sit down to disable about 3 different antennas that are in the system: your Bluetooth, your Wi-Fi, and your cellular, because you can patch your cellular phone into your computer. So there are actually 3 different receivers that the child has to know to disable if he wants to convert his Chromebook to a hardwired configuration. So I thought that was really strange that, Julian, you were saying the shadow players, they know exactly what they're doing. They're making it a couple steps harder for even parents to understand, the hardware, the specifications that they have to pay attention to, their options. There's no training, whether it be for the teachers, the students, the parents. They're just given this Chromebook, which I don't think is an optimal choice for a safe school. I would definitely go with a different laptop that you push the airplane mode button. It's one button, it stays that way, and set it and forget it. But now you have to worry if the child clicks another button and enables the Wi-Fi antenna, because they allow you to actually operate in airplane mode but still do Wi-Fi texting, which is a misnomer to how people typically look at what airplane mode is. So the technology has evolved with 5G, and we haven't kept up with it. Now, I was always told if you put it on airplane mode, you disable all your antennas, but now they have options to toggle on Wi-Fi while you're in airplane mode. So airplane mode only means cellular data, like 1.8 gigahertz. The cell phone frequencies are 1.9 gigahertz. It does not mean you're disabling. It does not necessarily mean you're disabling Wi-Fi. So all these protocols get very confusing. And even for me, I don't think it's a confusing subject, but I think they limit the distribution of data. I don't know if laptop manufacturers have followed suit with cell phone manufacturers in giving safety warnings, in their fine print. I know EHT has something on their website said, read the fine print. It was a project that they had done for a sponsor, to discuss what kind of fine print was in digital devices. I don't know if they've covered laptops. But, I talked to you before, Julian, about the kids putting their hands on these Wi-Fi antennas. I was thinking about the chassis of the computer where the keyboard is, but now how many times do you open and close the cover of a computer right by the right-hand corner of that screen? And if it's on and you've just walked away, it's almost, it's a very common practice. So I guess there's a lot of things that they could do to improve, laptop design. And one of the things that I think would be, a good effort for anybody that's involved in a safe tech school project is to start writing these computer laptop manufacturers and say, you can do better than this, for the kids. And I think with 5G, I haven't confirmed this, but I think they're probably going to install software that will eventually always keep these Wi-Fi antennas on to receive data. So they might not be transmitting, but right now, you do put airplane mode on and those other things are turned off. You do disable all the Wi-Fi, but I think in the future, it's going to run just like smart meters, where there'll always be a mesh in the background operating if they have the right software. So I think that's the future of what we're looking at.
So we have litigation about to begin involving smart meters in many different parts of the country. But I think the key point, which of your fascinating comments, Mary, is how valuable the insights that you and Jenny, others in local communities can develop. And Jeff's concept and Charles's concept of synergy through their program is the key, because lawyers can't do this alone. Lawyers, as I've tried to suggest, can be part of the tip of the spear, but the art of winning is going to build effective alliances with communities such as you have in Virginia, with organizations like Jeff and Charles have, with political leaders such as Senator Markey and Blumenthal. We can turn the tide, we can turn the wheel if we work effectively together.
I think it's almost an absolute, it's like a now or never thing the way I see it. I mean, basically when a child is staring at a screen that has a Wi-Fi antenna on, they're staring right into the antenna. And so we had an event where a school teacher from one of the Virginia counties came up to me afterwards and he said, from the beginning of this school year till now, which we're talking about a month, he says, I've seen children really, have their eyesight, it's significantly degrade to the point where they can't see the board anymore. So, because I told him, I said, the screen, there's a great website, reticare.com, reticare.com, and it talks about how eye strain eventually leads to retinal damage, which eventually leads to blindness. And this is what we're doing to our kids, because nobody's telling them to wear blue light glasses. Nobody's telling them to put a blue light filter across there. Nobody's telling them that you should cable up and disable the Wi-Fi. So their eyesight will, of course, all the other bioeffects that come with Wi-Fi, but their eyesight, I think, is one of the first things that will be affected by this digital classroom, unfortunately. So if you're a parent, I would really pay attention to that.
I do feel like the industry knows it's headed that direction, because I don't know if you all have noticed, but when you walk into almost any store these days, you will find blue light glasses.
It won't protect you from the radiation though. So
but I'm saying, I think that people know this, and I think the industry knows it's headed this direction, because it's a very popular item now to try to act like that will be a protective measure to take.
It's really what I would call, you want to talk about a false claim. What is the blue light glasses really protecting you against? A flicker rate? So, I mean, I don't really know how that protects you against this RFR, but the fact that they are not differentiating between the two and they have the same bioeffects, I doubt that it will mitigate very much anything.
It's very interesting, Mary, that you are highlighting the eye. We have another project which will, in due course, prove, we believe, 2 critical dose effects that will change the entire science on this. The first dose effect is measuring the output of EMFs. And as I mentioned, through Joe Sandry and the National Spectrum Management Association, we have the tools right now to measure that dose effect. How much radiation are being emitted from laptops, from cell phones, from cell towers, from smart meters? We can know. The other dose curve is what's happening in the body. And I wrote an article called Seeing the Big Picture in Medical Science, Stanford Journal of Social Innovation, I guess it is. And it turns out that the eye offers a platform for the entire body. We can pick up damages to vascular damages, for example. We can pick up mitochondrial changes within the cell through the eye. We can pick up injury to the brain, Alzheimer's and so forth, through the damage to the optical nerve and mitochondrial changes within these cells. So if you marry these 2 dose curves and show that the exposure connects to biological, cellular, and subcellular damage, and do it in a way that's affordable, easily objective, measurable, and non-invasive. End of story. And that's where the technology is moving for those who really care about these kinds of issues.
I guess that the crux of the matter here is how much can you say is being caused by blue light, which it does do, it does cause retinal damage, and how much is being caused by RFR. In other words, it's known with millimeter waves that eye damage, now this would be the cornea, occurs. So I guess that's just the question I have, again, with the overlap of the symptoms that the Screen Time Action Network people wrote into their town hall comments, gave a list of bioeffects that does occur with blue light, but they also occur with radiation. So that's just the question I have out there. We don't know how much is due to one and how much of it is due to the other.
The legal proposition on what you're saying is who has the burden of proof? And what I would like to urge clearly is it's not up to the public to have to sort out which is what. I mean, if it's blue light and RFR emanating from the same device for which the manufacturers have, it's their burden to show which percentage is blue light and which percentage is RFR from a legal point of view.
Because I know a lot of people, because there's a lot more literature out there on the blue light causing these things. I just added, my personal opinion on this, that because the symptoms overlap, you have to question, is a portion of that due to these antennas? I mean, this was what got me, going down the rabbit hole with looking for antennas behind the display, and sure enough, they're there. So that since they're there, by deduction, you could conclude that they are contributing and making it far worse.
It's called contributing cause in law.
Yeah.
Okay, well, lo and behold, we've got time to slip in like one good last question here. So I'm looking for anyone that's got a interest in that. What we will do when this is released is in the credits, so we'll have all the various websites you'll want to that we've been referencing and stuff. So whether you wrote stuff down or not, you don't have to worry. It'll be in there for you. It's always interesting how in the United States, it always ends up in the court, which is really quite nice because really it kind of takes it away from all the emotion and every other problem that you see that goes on within all this back and forth. So that part looks to be where it's finally made itself to the right place.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that it has to come down to that, because I think, appealing to the human condition at the local level, say a superintendent or school teacher or a teachers union, that it should be sufficient to at least have them exercise some way to start reducing, the radiation levels. And the specs within the computer to be able to hardwire or to be able to put on airplane mode. And our initial surveys in one particular school district said they couldn't do much of anything. They couldn't put all these cords and change a wireless computer, Chromebook, to a wired computer because of trip hazards and fire hazards. So even though they have the money to do it and are willing to do it, they can't do it within the confines of the classroom designed as it is. So it's really a challenge to here people want to help. They don't want to have to go through a lawsuit, and yet their hands are still tied. So
just a final comment, which is that legally, it's interesting, Mary, notwithstanding what I presented, you are echoing the party line that their hands are tied. Their hands are not tied. Legally, they're not tied. But the good news of our whole program is there's a great highway here, a positive highway, and it's a combination using the law that I've laid out, that school administrators have a natural affinity with parents, with children, with teachers, and their own staff to call out the problem and exercise their right and opportunity for the wired classroom. I would also go beyond this, which is where this emphasis of heart and love comes in, that you could say that the enlightened companies also have an opportunity to join this alliance with the school administrators, the parents, and the children. And it's all about innovation. So if I were the CEO of one of these companies, laptop companies or cell phone companies, I'd take a hard look at what can we do to innovate? And what if companies start to compete on safety? What if that becomes a critical sales advantage for consumers to say, this laptop, this analog meter, and so forth, this cell tower produces less radiation, and that becomes, we then taps into the enormous power of the consumer. There's a massive win-win for large parts of the society here. It's not just parents that have to be suing school administrators who then get sued by companies. No, there's a real high road here. And coming back to Charles and Jeff's key point, it's all about synergy.
They're all stakeholders for sure in that schoolroom between the teachers and the kids. I mean, they're all subjected to it. So for them to stand and say, well, the kids are obligated, you're shooting your own self in the left foot. So there is a great synergy there for sure. Well, I got to tell you, this was fantastic. Obviously, we can keep continuing the conversation, which everybody's going to want to do, because you're going to want to think of how you can get involved for yourself and how to help further what we're doing here and help Julian in his little mission, as well as Mary and Jenny. So I'm excited that you were here today, and thanks for getting the ball rolling.
Appreciate it.